27 years ago. Yes, I'm that old. I wasn't feeling well. So I went to my family doctor, and at that visit, she told me I had PCOS, which I didn't realize how serious it was at the time. You know, what that meant for my future, like not being able to have my own children. I had really irregular cycles, maybe one a year, like I'd never get it. So my friends were like, yay, that's so good. You're so lucky. And because I had like my best friend had it like twice a month. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I don't have that. But it was definitely a hormonal imbalance. I also was really depressed. I had acid reflux, so she gave me a prescription for that. She gave me antidepressant and something for IBS. I didn't want to take those prescription drugs. And so there wasn't the internet back then, but I looked into what causes PCOS. And it's excess caffeine, sugar, and carbohydrates. And at the time, I worked at a coffee shop where before I'd go to school, I would go to the coffee shop and I'd make the scones and the muffins and cinnamon rolls. And then I'd go to high school. And then after school, I would go back. And we would close about, 5:30 p.m. And whatever didn't sell, I got to go home with. So some days, you think I'm kidding, but I had like boxes. The doctor said it was nothing I was doing wrong, but obviously I was doing stuff wrong because I lived off of coffee. I ate all the sugar and the carbs, and I didn't want to just not eat my favorite foods anymore. So I just started creating some of my favorite things like cinnamon rolls into like protein forward things, and people like it. So it's, I don't know, I think it's pretty cool to be able to eat delicious food and feel great. I was living at my parents'. I was a teenager at the time. I didn't even know what hunger was because we just ate all the time. Right? Like there was no like, oh, I'm not hungry, I'm not gonna eat. What? Right? We would even have like, my hardest habit to break was a bed night snack, because for 18 years of my life, we always had a bed night snack. And I wasn't even hungry, but it was like we were going to fade away and die if we didn't eat before bed. And it wasn't healthy stuff. And it was like peanut butter toast. But when I started making my own recipes, I lied and said I had a gluten allergy. I didn't even know what gluten was, but I realized that was a carbohydrate thing. But then like they kept making rice and I'm like, I can't have that. They're like, there's no gluten in rice. And I was like, what? Well, I can't have that either. So I was kind of like, but in a way it wasn't a lie because I couldn't have that. That was keeping me sick. And I think I should have just told them that food makes me sick. That's making me unhealthy and I can't have that anymore. But I wasn't as strong as I am now. I just made my own things. They just realized I was eating low carb. So it was okay. It's just amazing how food changed all that. It took maybe a week before like my depression lifted and it never came back. The IBS also went away right away because that fiber was it's really hard on people's digestion. But the PCOS, took time. But again, I didn't cut out caffeine right away. So it took a little bit of time. But like PCOS is basically a diabetes that affects female fertility, right? I had to shrink my fat cells and gain muscle. And I know I got caught into, just because you're not eating carbs, I thought I was going to lose weight and I didn't. People don't like me saying this, but it is a caloric deficit that you need. I needed to focus on more protein and less fat when it comes to my weight loss journey, because fat has only two places to go. It's either going to be used for energy, and I wasn't running marathons then. I did eventually, or it goes to storage. People don't realize that it doesn't just remove from your body. That's the only two places it has to go. So I had to definitely lower the fat and increase protein. And once I got a hold of that, it happened quite quickly. And I got smaller than I ever thought I would ever be. People just told me I was big boned and I was always going to be fat. They did. And I'm not. When people say I'll never, lose weight or be small, it's like, I remember feeling like that. Like we would do like the tests like this, and they're like, oh, you're really big boned. Well, no, I'm not. But it was just because I was so, heavy. Like I just couldn't get my fingers around my wrist. I met my husband when I was only 17 and he was 26. I was married before I could legally drink alcohol. And I told Craig that we're probably going to have to adopt children if you want kids. And he's like, that's great. He was so excited about it. I was like, wow, I really chose the right person. So we started adopting, and I went to school for nutrition and exercise physiology, but I didn't, go into like nutrition right away. I was going to be a stay-at-home mom because we started adopting kids. I was a rock climbing guide making like $8 an hour. My husband lost his job in the middle of our adoption. And if you know anything about adoption, my job, I didn't have insurance. I didn't have an income really. It was very little. It was more for fun. Every dollar we put into that adoption goes back to zero when you lose insurance and the main job, right? I got pretty depressed, and I had a friend named Jamie. She said, Maria, you're going to write a book and put all your recipes in there, and you're going to sell that to raise money for your adoption. So that's how it started. And she said, well, now you're going to start a blog. What's a blog? Like blogs, just the internet just started, right? So I started a blog. That's why my blog name is Maria Mind Body Health. I could have picked like keto.com, right? But I started a blog, and it gave me a reason to wake up. But I didn't even own a computer at that time. I had to ride my bicycle to the library because we had to sell our cars. We didn't have any money. It came from that. I didn't think anybody was buying it because it wasn't, my first was self-published. And then all of a sudden Craig showed me the numbers and he said, I don't need a job. And I'm like, what? I didn't realize I thought it was just like local people buying it to help support us. And I just couldn't believe it. And then when I first got a hold of my published books, when I held that first one, I just cried. I was just like, I can't believe it's real. I'm in Costco. I'm in Barnes and Noble. I couldn't believe it, but I saw my hard work come together, which is really nice because I think some people work so hard, but they never see the finished product of what they've been working on, and to have something tangible like that. I also this weekend, I was missing my kids, because I was gone, and I was reminiscing about their childhood, and I worked so hard. I wish I would have enjoyed them a little bit more, held them more. And my husband laughs because he's like, you held them all the time. But at the same time, I was so focused on work, and because I knew how it was to have nothing. And I didn't want to do that with children too, go back to losing everything. I think I was just working so hard. But I also feel grateful that my kids saw that work ethic too. It was hard because I remember someone telling me that you want to make God laugh, whatever you have planned, because everything I had planned did not happen the way I thought it did. And I was such a planner. I was tested a lot by God when it comes to becoming a parent and losing our house, having nothing. I struggled a lot. And I just realized that he's in charge, But I was mad at him for a long time, especially we had to leave the boys in Ethiopia for 6 months, and that was really hard. Yeah. I was mad at him then. But I think he understands. Made me stronger, that's for sure. This time of year is very emotional because we brought them home from Ethiopia the day before Thanksgiving. So this week is a lot. So I think that's when I reminisce about I wish I would have held them more as babies, because now they're teenagers, and to get them to even hold my hand would, be like, oh my gosh. But at the time, if I wasn't holding them, they would cry. They didn't even want Craig. It was just, I was like, oh my gosh, I just want to break. But now I'm like, oh, I just wish I could hold you again. They were made for me. The weight was because it was meant to be. Yeah. They're very cool kids. When we adopted them, it was just no question. Craig and I knew we were going to raise them differently than what we were raised. And we just didn't have sugar. To be honest, they were just happy to eat. Especially after Ethiopia. Meal times were stressful because my oldest was always happy. He would always sing when food would come. My youngest would scream for more. Even though I knew that little belly was stocked full, he'd scream and cry and kick for more. And he was just afraid to be starving again. But they still like now that they're teenagers, I kind of teach them that they're pioneers, and so we'll be at the beach. Kids will be having like apples and like, that's just sugar. I'm like, let's just make friends. You don't have to teach them about sugar, but they're trying to like teach that, you need protein and this type of stuff. We also homeschool, so that makes it easier. I'm so grateful that I helped make them strong enough at this point, because like I speak again, like around the world, and we were on a cruise ship. On a cruise ship, there is a lot of junk, a lot of bad food. Whenever I would see them, like when we would have meals, or I would like meet them, they always had good food on their plate, and I was really proud of them.
Doesn't this coffee cake look good? Let me apply some butter on it.
Can you believe my bread is only made with 3 ingredients? I've been making it for over 20 years, so I know a lot of tips and tricks. Check out my latest YouTube video to see just how to make this delicious bread.
You can find this on our latest YouTube video.
My kids, they don't have any money. They don't have a car. Like, I understand, like, if your kids go to school, they're going to be offered one thing, but when you're at home, you can have them be the best people they are meant to be by giving them the best food that you can. Like, especially when kids are younger, they don't have the opportunity to go buy anything else, right? So it is what you offer them, and you are in charge of their palate. That's why, like, Kai, his first human, food besides breast milk was bone marrow. Like, you are in charge, and he still has a savory sweet tooth, a savory tooth, not a sweet tooth. Offer them food that is going to make them, because here's the thing, like, we give kids whatever they want, and then we expect them to not have a food addiction at 18 and not have it be adults with food addiction. That just doesn't stop after decades of eating junk. Just doesn't. When I started the nutrition business, it was a wellness studio that I did yoga at. And they said, Maria, you should start a nutrition business out of our office. And I was like, really? I wasn't even confident enough that I could survive. Like, I was such a different person then. I didn't think it would work. I didn't think anybody would want it, but I worked out of that wellness center, and I would teach classes like sugar shock. I called it sugar shock because everybody knows sugar's bad, but they don't realize where sugar's found. I teach them about there's more sugar in your bloodstream after eating a bag of potato chips versus a milkshake. But nobody really realizes that, because the potato chips aren't sweet, right? I taught these classes, and then after the classes, I just had like so many people come up to be like, oh my gosh, I need to work with you and this and that. And it just evolved to, I don't want to say be stricter, but I know what works after decades of working with people. I know what doesn't work. Because sure, everybody's different, but biology is the same. The hardest part is getting them to follow what I tell them to do. And so just being a good coach, being a good cheerleader is what's most important, because I know what they need to do. I need to get them to do it. I think that's the hardest part. I would say the majority of people can stick with it. Like, when they see this as a lifestyle and not like, I want to lose 20 pounds and then they plan on going back to sugar. Like, I can see those people a mile away. No, I'm talking about like Felicia and Twyla and all these people. Like, I can remember their names because they had to do it for their life. And they realize that. They realize their food addiction, and they don't. Here's a problem with food addiction. You don't tell an alcoholic to have vodka on Fridays, right? But with food addiction, there's even some like keto coaches out there that tell you to have a carb up once a week. That's like the worst idea ever. You're going to have muscle loss. Your food addiction is going to come back. And it's just like, why even toy with that? You don't tell someone to have vodka on Fridays that has an alcohol issue. You don't tell people with food addiction to have ice cream on Fridays. Like, just don't. I think when people realize that, they do much better. We have testimonies of reversing or going into remission for Hashimoto's, MS, Parkinson's, kidney disease, like you name it. We have pictures of cancer shrinking. And when I say we, it's Craig and I, because he helps so much. I should always say we. I shouldn't even say those are my books. They should be Craig's too, because he helps so much. The testimonies are like, I try to post them on my Instagram all the time because I want people to realize how, but getting off pain medication, that, like antidepressants, anxiety meds. I was at a book signing. I used to say, hey, where do you want me to do a book signing? And like people would plan a book signing in, wherever. I'd go every state that somebody would plan one. And I remember a teenager in Colorado came up to me. She said, Maria, if it weren't for you, I'd be institutionalized for my anxiety. But she came to this huge event and like talked to people. And like, I love hearing that because that's really life-changing. When I was first starting out, I would lift weights at the YMCA, do body pump. And this woman would come in the summertime, but she always wore a bandana and she didn't have any eyebrows. And she'd come lift weights. And one day she came up to me. She said, Maria, I want to hire you. I have alopecia. And I've heard that you've helped people reverse that. And I said, yes, I have. So she came into my office and I worked with her. What's interesting is she was a professor, so I only see her in the summertime. And so 6 months went by and I didn't see her. She didn't contact me. And I was like, okay. So 6 months later went by and it becomes to be May. She comes to the Y. She had her stupid bandana on. She rips it off and she had a full head of hair. She said, Maria, I just had my first haircut in 10 years. To me, like, it's so memorable because, like, I guess the reason it's so memorable is she, as emotional as that was for her, she cried. She was so happy to have hair. She couldn't follow it and her food addiction came back. And she lost all of her hair again. She didn't want to give up her ice cream. I just think it's sad. She gave up and she went back to her sugar and carbs and she lost all of her hair. It was more about the dairy and gluten that was getting a hold of her alopecia. And there's different types of alopecia too, so just be aware of that if anybody's listening. I was really seen as the crazy lady. I'm so grateful because I never once spent a dime on advertising. It was all word of mouth. But people had such great success, not just with their weight, but with their moods and with, getting off of insulin and high blood pressure meds and pain meds. And so the word of mouth just kept spreading. And I'm just grateful that I caught on. I have a lot of cookbooks out there, but not a lot of people like to cook. But I try to make it easy and accessible and teach them not just how to write a recipe, but how to cook delicious food. Like when you make food, you want salt, fat, acid, and heat. Those 4 things create a delicious recipe. And like, what is fish sauce? It makes things so delicious. It has umami in it. And so trying to teach people, add something with umami, really like brings the flavor out, It's fun to teach people how to make good food. It was 27 years ago. It wasn't really called keto then. It was more called Atkins. But what people know of Atkins today is not what Dr. Atkins wanted. That's not like Dr. Atkins was a ketogenic, advocate. He didn't promote the bars and shakes and stuff that are out there. But it was definitely a ketogenic diet. So it was 27 years ago. I started calling my recipes keto, X and Y. People didn't really know what keto was. I was this crazy lady, which I almost wish I could go back then because keto's so popular now. There's so much junk. There's so much junk out there. On the cover of Women's World magazine, I had a client, Twyla. She lost 270 pounds, her before after picture, and it said, Twyla lost 270 pounds on ultra keto. And I was like, it's just real food. But they call it ultra keto because I don't recommend the keto breads at Costco and the keto shakes and that type of stuff. So then it's called ultra keto, I guess. But I'm glad that I had to go through it before all that stuff came out there. So, because it didn't get a hold of me. Because now people like, they see, oh, keto candy. Like, I'm going to grab that. It's like, oh, don't. Just have some steak and eggs. Honestly, I'm going to say, be careful what you read on the internet. Because a lot of the, the keto advocates will push higher fat, MCT oil, exogenous ketones, stuff that's a waste of money and just going to leave you let down. I have free private Facebook groups that you can join for free. Twyla was one. She never paid me a dime. And she still thanks me for helping her lose over 200 pounds, almost 300. Felicia was another one. She lost over 200 pounds, never paid me a dime. It's all on the free Facebook group. So I realized everybody, especially being in a poor situation like I realized not everybody can afford a book or afford to hire me. You don't have to. It's free. I liked it when it wasn't trending. I liked it when I was a crazy lady because there wasn't the keto bread. There wasn't the keto, like all of that stuff. The keto brownies, like Duncan Hines has a brownie now. That's when people will fail, when they start adding in those things. Like the keto bread's not even gluten-free. Those brownies aren't gluten-free. And like, it's all about the ingredients. People don't realize it's not about how many carbs are in it. Look at the ingredients. That's really important. Tapioca, like Chalk Zero is one that has so much junky ingredients. This is chocolate stuff. The ingredients are atrocious. I do retreats around the world. And the more I travel and see like the hardships of other cultures, especially where my kids are from, they're from Ethiopia. Like, why was I born where I was born? Like a white woman, a privileged, like, why did I won the lottery just by that? But then why was I gifted this opportunity to help people? I feel like I'm just a girl, especially when I'm at home, my kids I'm like, practice piano, like brush your teeth. And I just feel like, an annoying mom. And then I get to like go and see all these people that are just like so excited to meet me. And I'm like, I'm just a girl. I'm just a mom, I'm just trying to speak the truth. It's pretty cool.